Thank you, Hugo, for speaking with the GeoBuiz and Geospatial world. INSPIRE is great inspiration for everybody in the world. It has been a classic example of a success story where the successes in the domain of spatial data infrastructure are far and few across the world. So I would like to ask you, it's now that 6 years into the initiation of INSPIRE initiative, and I see that European Commission has initiated, you've gone for a public consultation last year, and how has been the outcome of the assessment?
The public consultation was extremely interesting because it allowed us to capture the sentiments of the users of the infrastructure, but also of the producers of the data, those that were delivering the services. And we wanted to check out, like the temperature of the water, how far they stood in implementing this interoperability framework, which is called INSPIRE. And when I say interoperability, I don't only mean technical interoperability. In the strict meaning of the word, it's things that work together. Yeah. And the first thing that need to work together are the people. And that are the people that are drafting the laws. INSPIRE is a European Union law. It's called a Directive. That means that the countries of the European Union and their stakeholders, they have decided on giving a certain direction to build up this infrastructure. And the first thing they agreed to do is to better coordinate their actions. Before, we had a very fragmented situation with a lot of organizations who are each holding a piece of this spatial data jigsaw. The meteo offices, the mapping agencies, the soil agencies, the environmental agencies, the departments on infrastructure. They were all serving their own clients and at times trying to use each other's data, sometimes charging each other for the use of the data, sometimes not allowing each other to use the data. So the first thing they had to do, according to this directive, set up a coordination between them and then redraft their laws and their licenses and their arrangements so that they would take away all the practical obstacles, procedural obstacles as we call them, at the point of use, so that the organization that needs the data at a certain moment can use it without any further hassle. Where do we stand on that? Europe is a complex place. In some countries, they have set up an umbrella organization across ministries, across departments to coordinate that. In others, they have taken the decision to give it to a mapping agency or another organization. And what we see now, that those that were most successful in advancing were those that set up this kind of an umbrella organization where each of the ministries in charge of the organizations that holds a piece of the puzzle, right, gets a sense of ownership, that this infrastructure is also there for them. So that was very important. Some have been more successful than others. The next thing that they had to start doing is redrafting their laws and their arrangements. And in some countries we have seen INSPIRE licenses being created. We have seen in other countries that after 7 years they still haven't managed to come to an agreement. In other countries they have really enshrined it into the legislation, the obligation to share. So that's the result of a directive which gives various options to implement it so that the objectives in the end are being reached. Our public consultation has taught us that some has been more successful in removing these barriers than in others.
Fantastic.
So it's a checkpoint. We now need to take it a step further. And of course there is the issue, and that's a very important one, of identifying the right data sets, the right pieces of the puzzle. Because if you're working like we do in trying to mitigate effects of climate change, other societal pressures from the driving forces, which are economic development, land uptake, and so on, that all generate a pressure on the environment, which then alters the state of the environment. As a net result, we try to measure the impacts, the risks of flooding, the risk of our natural resources being depleted, biodiversity becoming poorer and poorer. That's this kind of impacts. And then you need to formulate your response to influence the driving forces. They need to identify the data sets, economic data. They need to look at emissions into the environment from industrial facilities. Then they need to measure the state of the environment. Then they need to assess and produce these kind of risk maps or overviews, spatial overview, where people, our natural resources, all our assets are at risk. And some have been comprehensive, more comprehensive than others. Some countries, they have said, oh, we focus on this data set, we take this, we take that. What we see now is that the puzzle is not complete. In order to be successful in this management of all these risks which threaten our society, you need to be sure that you have all the pieces of the puzzle. So we are partially satisfied. There's progress, there's coordination, but we are not there yet. The other thing that people have said, and this is very important, 98% of all those that responded said INSPIRE is still extremely relevant for the issues that it was set up to address. On the objectives, that you need to share data, that you need to document your data, that you need to publish it on the web, that you need to be able to look at this documentation, to know what your data set is about, that you can view it, that you can download through a service. You say, yes, these priority objectives, operational objectives, they are still highly, highly relevant. On the actions, the concrete actions which were implemented, say we are not satisfied. We are partially satisfied. We can now find more documented data. Much more data has entered into the infrastructure, but we still lack these view services for a lot of the data. We still lack these download services for a lot of the data. So it's like we are trying to build a stack and we are somewhere here. All the other blocks on the stack still need to come. And that's what we have learned from the public consultation, what we have learned from the reports from the member states who have been very open in reporting on their progress made. And now we take a moment of reflection to review which aspects of that piece of legislation would need to be changed to address the issues identified. We need to reflect for a moment on what other measures, not legal, we need to develop further. How we can build up more effective public-private partnerships to help us build the technical components, but also to bring in data. We need to reflect on how to better sell the infrastructure through very concrete applications and use cases which have shown that by using this geospatial data, the technologies, so on, we really provide a tremendous economic added value, that we contribute to innovation, that there is growth, economic growth, but also that we are increasing the skills of the people and hopefully also creating jobs. We have learned in this conference about the tremendous amounts of money that all this together, geospatial technologies combined with good legislation, could generate for our society. But unless we tackle all these demons which we are fighting everywhere, sometimes they are stronger in this region, weaker in that region, we need to fight them all. Otherwise we are not going to reap these billions of dollars or euros or whatever that all these beautiful economic studies are telling about.
I also understand that different countries in the which are part of INSPIRE Directive are at different stages of implementation. Some are quite in an advanced stage, and some are still in the process of setting up things. So, is there any initiative in terms of bringing them on par with each other, or let the pace go at its own?
We are not allowed to let it go on as it goes on. We have arrived at a stage where we have to draw a new baseline.
Okay.
INSPIRE is not an option, it's a piece of law.
Yes.
And already the European Commission started with what we call pre-infringement procedures on this law with a number of countries who have, let's call it, performed the worst so far. This already has led to 3 countries responding immediately, making their data available through the GeoPort, the EU GeoPort. So we had immediately very positive reactions. I would call it, initially, we give a little nudge, a warning shot in front of the ball. If we would not do that, the public would say, what is the European Commission doing? They are the guardians of the treaties. They are the guardians of the European law. If a country does not respect its own laws, because they have designed INSPIRE, then somebody has to tell them, and that's our job. Of course, at the same time, we enter into a dialogue with the countries to understand better what are their issues. We should not forget that we are slowly crawling out of a very severe economic crisis in Europe. And it had a profound impact, not only on INSPIRE, unfortunately also on many other important social aspects of our society in Europe. So yes, we are doing something constructively, warning people, trying to identify where we need to put more resources, and also, what most important, if some countries have been more successful than others, we would like them to work together, share their developments, the software, the tools, but also the lessons learned, so that they can help the neighbor with whom they share so many interests across borders to rise up to the same level.
As I understand, INSPIRE Directive enables the spatial data infrastructure of about 34 data themes. Has there been any consultation in the first round around the themes as well? Has there been any discussion on what is relevant, what is probably more relevant and that need to be added to the existing data themes, something like that?
There was, of course, when the directive itself was designed, there was a very broad public consultation and an involvement of also, for example, European Environment Agency, where we looked at all these different pieces of European law in the environmental area, on water, on air, emissions, environmental impact assessments. And then we looked at what data do we need for managing better our water, our air. And then we came, of course, to meteorological data, to soil data, land use data, land cover, rivers, and a lot of reference data. The hydrographic networks, the transport networks, also the cadastres. Properties are important, especially the attributes of these pieces of land. So all these themes are not there just for a purpose. We put them in this entire risk management cycle, and we looked at what type of data is needed on impacts, on state of environment, on pressures. Has there now been a consultation on this again? It's a permanent process. When we find out that certain data themes are missing, then we will again talk with the member states and say, shouldn't we bring that also under the infrastructure? But so far, we asked that question in the public consultation, and nobody has expressed any particular dissatisfaction. There are some issues with trying to identify where my data set fits exactly into these 34 themes, but this is a minor issue. The most important thing is that it's somewhere in the infrastructure.
Another outcome of this consultation has been about the complexity of the technical standards. So, how is INSPIRE addressing this issue?
This is a very good point. First of all, people still today are saying we are not conform with INSPIRE because there are 20 metadata elements, documentation. We only have 17, so it's a yes or no situation. No. INSPIRE is first of all about the data sharing. And what I call now, and what we have to communicate, is that you are already conform with INSPIRE if you are willing to share your data, electronic data, via the internet, even via a very basic download service. You get the data set, you can attach it to a polygon data set, and you can work with it. You already conform because you are ready to share as is. And then you go to conformity level 2. Document your data. Try to make it as complete as possible so that the people working with this data can do something with it. They better understand its content. Conformity level 3. Try now also to put up a download service which allows you to integrate it immediately into your application, into your desktop GIS or into your web-based GIS system. Conformity level 4. Can you also organize your data in the so-called INSPIRE data models so that we have unique identifiers for every object, that we have attributes with their name, with agreed lists of the codes which we are going to attribute to these attributes? That's another level. So INSPIRE is as complex as you want it to be. I compare the INSPIRE complexity with like buying a car. Mm-hmm. The first thing that you need is something that gets you from A to B. And then you start to add options. And in the end, you're going to have your car with all its beautiful options, what I call the fully swinging and dancing INSPIRE. But you need to get there. You need to, it's a little bit like saving your money to buy a new option. So yes, if you want to have the fully swinging and dancing INSPIRE, especially given the level of the skills in a lot of the organizations, then it looks complex. But it's a complexity that once you master it, is going to bring you the highest benefits. In the meantime, you will also reap benefits if you exchange your data in a simple, less complex way to master in the beginning. The complexity is needed to reap the full benefits. Mm-hmm. Less benefits, less complexity, but it's still INSPIRE.
One of the benefits that has been envisaged with INSPIRE is it being a good governance tool, right? So how far has that benefit been realized?
According to what the member states tell us, a lot. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest advantages, benefits they are reaping already today, is that all these different departments holding a piece of the jigsaw are starting to talk to each other, are starting to understand each other. Sometimes one region collects the same type of data as another region but does it differently. Mm-hmm. Then they need to bring it together to deal with cross-border events like a flood. And they notice, hey, our data is not really comparable. Mm-hmm. So they enter into a dialogue to make the data more comparable so it can be used together. And this has been a tremendous benefit of INSPIRE already.
Across the European Union?
Across the European Union, certainly, but it's important that they start talking to their neighbors. Mm-hmm. We have seen in Germany that they set up a very good marine data infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Germany is a federal state with different länder, provinces, bordering their sea. Different organizations collecting the same data in the different länder. They set up the marine spatial data infrastructure. They organize their data in each of the länder. They are now connecting, they are sharing, And in the process, they have learned all these things about the quality of their data, how to show it on the map, and how to serve collectively, more efficiently, the multiple clients that they have. This is a very good example of the benefits that INSPIRE has already brought. Again, it's not the same in all countries.
How do you see this benefits going manifold in the next few years?
For the next few years, I think we are going to see an exponential growth of benefits, because the countries have now built up their understanding. They have built up the basic infrastructure. They have more or less their laws in order. And we are exercising also the pressure. There is a more and more demand to use INSPIRE as a tool for better regulation, for better lawmaking. Better lawmaking requires better information. And the hunger for information to improve legislation is enormous. It's a key priority of the European Commission to do so. In addition, the European Union has come out with its digital single market strategy, which aims to remove all obstacles across borders, with a very strong focus on e-commerce, but also on e-government, on e-society, as it is called in the strategy. This is an enormous leverage for INSPIRE, which is still an environmental piece of legislation, a very strange animal in the zoo of environmental legislation. But this digital single market, which has exactly the same objectives for a part as INSPIRE has, will create an enormous momentum, will leverage a lot of activity on using INSPIRE for other purposes than environment as well, but the basic infrastructure and the growth of the infrastructure that we will see will allow us to better implement INSPIRE also for the environment.
One of the objectives with which the INSPIRE Directive has been set out is to create a knowledge-based economy. So can you cite an example as how this is being realized?
What is knowledge? Knowledge comes from being informed. Information is the result of a question that you raise. For example, when I would buy this property here, what is the risk that it's going to be flooded? If I buy this property here, how much is my family, my children, are they going to be exposed to noise? Are they going to be exposed to bad air, which is going to affect their health? In countries where this has already been realized, the information to answer that question, the people have become more knowledgeable. The government has become more knowledgeable. The people being knowledgeable about the risks that they are exposed to, they will put pressure on their public services, their masters, political masters, to address the problems, because it's the people which are the core of democracy. So these benefits are already being realized. People are becoming more knowledgeable thanks to this communication of risks and impact. That's one aspect. The other aspects are also economical. Again, people will ask the same question. What kind of conditions, when I'm an industry, do I need to satisfy if I want to set up my new industrial installation there? Because ultimately, by law, I will be liable if something happens to me. So now industries, when they are looking around on where to develop their activities, already today they can say, we are more and better informed about these conditions. So we see how all these things are appearing more effective here than they are there. Sometimes people will ask the question in region A and they won't get the answer. Region B they already do. And this is a very positive sign.
Has there been any study or any estimate as to how what kind of return on investments this INSPIRE directive is going to give the European Union over a period of say 2020 or 25?
At the moment, it's extremely difficult to work on costs and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. We are dealing with public authorities and getting all these splits of what money is allocated to INSPIRE, what are we doing anyhow, how do we do our different accounting, very hard. But from the figures that we have, we can say they are fully in line with the expectations at the time that the directive was designed. So we are quite positive about this. The other problem that you have, we also have already evidence of cost savings, important. But the wider economic benefits of being well informed and knowledgeable comes, of course, from taking wise decisions.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's the decisions that will influence the driving forces, the economic activities and so on, which need to change in order to lower the pressures, reduce the impacts in the end. And this is a process that takes time. Because if today I make a decision that I'm not going to let certain cars enter into my city because they are too polluting, it's only after a couple of years that I'm going to be able to fully appreciate and calculate the benefits of this activity. We will certainly have to do that by 2020, which is the year by which INSPIRE should have been fully implemented. Then we will be obliged to do a full cost and benefit assessment of the instrument.
So how do you see this spinning off very innovative applications and products as well?
The spin-off of applications.
Is INSPIRE also creating some mechanisms, some instruments to encourage creation of the innovation of applications as well?
The stakeholders who responded to the public consultation are convinced that it will. In synergy with the entire drive of more open data, really available data, which allows people to play around with it, develop new applications, become creative, without all the different obstacles they have. As the interoperability technically will also increase, it will become even more easy to develop these kind of applications, because you don't have to develop 35 different interfaces to it. So already today we see several applications which are based on data in INSPIRE, which are being developed in the context of a wide variety of initiatives from both European Union level, local level. There are many apps. We have examples of those. So certainly, but in order to be innovative with data, you need to make it available.
Is INSPIRE, with its experience and with its expertise in building a spatial data infrastructure, I would want to call it a successful spatial data infrastructure, trying to influence, or rather is giving any suggestions for other nations and other regions who are trying to build spatial data infrastructure? Absolutely.
That's at least our experience. Already when we were in the process of adopting this piece of legislation, it caught the attention of China. Yep. We had a Chinese delegation visiting us. They invited us to China. They explained us that they were facing the same problems, and they are carrying it further. There's even a Chinese delegation here at the Geospatial World Forum. I was just answering to a request from New Zealand and Australia, ANSLIC, and they are coming to visit us on the 3rd of June. Again, to exchange experiences on spatial data infrastructures. Then we have another initiative, which is called the Group on Earth Observations, to build up the group Earth Observation System of Systems. INSPIRE has been positioned within that global initiative in the Architecture Committee as the governance model that we can develop worldwide. We've had excellent contacts and collaborations with the people in South America who want to develop the South American spatial data infrastructures. They have come to our INSPIRE conferences as well. Last year we had the US delivering a keynote speech on their development of their NSDI. We are learning from each other. We have learned a lot from them. Again, at this conference, we have the people from the US, the dialogue. So yes, I would say we do have an influence. Also, the financial organizations like World Bank already in 2010 discovered INSPIRE. They came to see us, they talked to us, said this is good because we are sponsoring a lot of nations in Central Eurasia, even countries which are now members of the European Union, and we would like them to build up their SDI, but take into account immediately all these environmental issues and so on.
If I may ask, what are the top 3 suggestions or advisories you would want to give to countries who are trying to set up spatial data infrastructure for many years but unsuccessfully?
First question I would ask is why have you been unsuccessful?
Okay.
Once you answer that question, you already know what you can do about it. If you would give them advice, then it's the same thing. First, set up your coordination structure, make an inventory of the laws and the regulations that you have in place, because that's the first obstacle that you have to remove.
The first and foremost, at least I observe in several countries, is the reluctance of the stakeholders in sharing the data.
Yes, data hogging is still happening a lot for various reasons. In some cases, they were asked by their governments to get a return on investment and sell their data. The other thing, it's probably even more difficult to remove, is the lack of transparency that we want to give.
Exactly.
To expose our data, because information is power. But again, the nations of the world, they have agreed to the IRIS Convention, at least many of them, about public access to environmental information. Of course, this is difficult to change. If you want to hide something, you can always hide it, one way or another.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we take it forward? Yes, definitely one has to self-reflect, a country has to self-reflect on what are the issues that are stopping stopping it from realizing the spatial data infrastructure, definitely, yes. And identify the gap areas and identify the hindrances or bottlenecks and start clearing them. But how has your experience and your working with the INSPIRE Directive right from its inception, can you share your insight? What exactly can a country pick up in realizing the goal of spatial data infrastructure?
First of all, they have to make it a political priority. I think it's 3 years ago, the UN again came together and they created the UN GGIM initiative. And I still remember the press release around this, because it's about building global spatial data infrastructure. And the press release said, building up a spatial data infrastructure is as important for a nation as road networks and telecommunication networks and other infrastructures. That's the first thing they have to realize politically. The second thing is, of course, that they need to resource it. It doesn't come for free.
True.
The benefits can be enormous, but it's really worthwhile to do so. These are my major advices. Resource it, recognize it's important. The other thing is that you need to realize that the world of information is changing rapidly. Citizens are already using platforms which are set up there, such as Ushaya, where they volunteer information on the state of the environment around them. They are even putting up their own sensors in cities. They are governing. They are putting peer pressure. Government need to realize that you cannot hide anything anymore. People have the tools to collaborate. And that puts even more urgency on embedding this more solidly in our society, in our dialogue with our clients, now speaking as a government officials, which are our citizens.
Thank you so much, Hugo, for sharing your insight.